Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to Jen's Books. I hope you're doing well and having a fantastic week. In this video, I'm going to be introducing you to 6 books that I plucked from my shelves that I'd like to recommend to you that I think you're going to enjoy. All of these books have one thing in common. They're all based on previous works of literature. What I would say is you don't need to know those books. You don't have to have read them and to enjoy these books as standalone, but they've all been inspired by previous plays or poems or other novels. And if you enjoy this video, do give it a thumbs up. Do let me know, because I'll be happy to do similar videos in the future. I've already got another 6 books that are based on other pieces of literature that I can go with it if it's something that you enjoy. But if you are new to the channel, do subscribe, do come along for the journey while I challenge myself to read 100 books in 2023, which, as I've said previously, I think I'm going to smash. I think I'm going to do much better than that, fingers crossed. And I've had some corking reads so far that I've enjoyed sharing with you all, and I hope that you found something, a new favourite read from following me on this journey. So first of all, I wanted to talk about Kamila Shamsie, Home Fire. This is a book that was published in 2017. I'm pretty sure it was either longlisted or shortlisted for the book. I think it was shortlisted. And Kamila Shamsie I've mentioned before. I've read her books previously. They're really, really good. She's a fantastic writer, but this particular book is based on the Sophocles play Antigone, or it's inspired by the Sophocles play Antigone. You don't need to know anything about Antigone to have read this, but if you do know the story of the play of Antigone and Ismene, it does sort of bring an extra level of enjoyment to the novel. So this is a book about 2 Muslim sisters, Isma, who's clearly based on Ismene, and Anika, who's a very strong-willed character who's clearly based on Antigone. And in this story, it's about identity, it's about what it is to be a British Muslim, but it's also about how young people or vulnerable people can be influenced by social media and other events in the world. So in the story, their brother Parve has disappeared. He's gone off to be a jihadist after his father, who none of them really knew, but they have this idea of who he was as a person. And in the story, it's all about the sisters trying to reclaim their brother and trying to work out who they are as individuals. So it's an interesting novel. It's really gripping. It has a really heart-wrenching ending as well. But I would definitely recommend this. It's an enjoyable book. It's about sacrifice. It's about identity. It's about loyalty. It's about love. And definitely pick this up if you've not read it before. Secondly, completely different kind of book, The Snow Child, and this is by Eowyn, Ivey, and this was released in 2012. And if you like fairy tales, if you like magic realism, if you like fables, this is a book that you're possibly going to enjoy. I really, really loved it. One of the things I really loved about this is the Alaskan backdrop. There's a really rich sense of place in here. So if, like me, you like books based in cold locations, this is one that you're probably going to enjoy. But it is kind of lyrical, it is kind of poetic, and it's really a retelling of that fairy tale of the Snow Child. And as I say, don't be put off by the term magic realism. It really works here. It's just a beautiful story. It's about a couple called Mabel and Jack who have suffered a loss of a child. And then one day this child appears in the woods out of nowhere. They live very rurally in Alaska. And the story's about loss, and it's about love, and it's about being a parent to this mythical child that's appeared from nowhere. It's about loss and hope and survival. But for me, that setting really works, and there's a real sense of magic in here. So if you're one that likes retellings of story tales and fables, this is a book that I'd definitely recommend. Thirdly is a book called The Story of Edgar Sawtell, and this is written by David Wroblewski. This was published in 2008, so it's a slightly older one, but this is one that I really, really, really loved. It's a retelling of Hamlet by Shakespeare. Again, as I say, you don't need to know Hamlet inside and out. You don't need to know the story to appreciate this book. In essence, it's a story about a little boy called Edgar, who again lives in a very rural farm in Wisconsin. He's a mute. And after the death of his father, he runs away into the woods with the Sawtell dogs. The farm is actually, it breeds these particular breed of dogs called the Sawtell, which are famous and sought after in the area. But when he finally returns back to the farm, he finds that his uncle has taken claim of the farm and has begun a relationship with his mother, which is out of necessity more than anything. But there's loads of mystery in it, and it's just beautifully described. The point of view jumps around in places. At one point we have the point of view from the murderer themselves. At one point we have the point of view through one of the dogs. But I really love this. And again, I mean, if you don't need to know Shakespeare to know about the tragic endings that you can expect. And here, this is one that is no disappointment. As you can see, it's quite a big book. You know that sometimes that can be a bit of a problem for me. It can be off-putting, but I really love this book. It really kept the pages turning throughout. So I would definitely recommend that one too. Next, we have The Mere Wife by Maria Dahvana Headley, and this was published in 2018, and this is one that I came across by accident as much as anything, but it's a retelling of Beowulf. Again, you don't need to have read Beowulf, you don't need to have seen that rather disturbing animated version that came out a few years ago. You can read this as a standalone book, but this is a story of a retelling of an epic poem, and we have two young boys at the centre of it. One is Gren, who's clearly named after Grendel, and the other one is Dylan. Dylan lives in a white picket fenced town of privilege, and Gren lives in the centre of a mountain with his mother. His mother is an ex-soldier who's suffering from PTSD. She came back from the war pregnant and not knowing how she got pregnant, and that's how Gren came about, and we never really answer the mystery of this, but she lives in the fringes. She's a myth in her own right. And then one day Dylan and Gren run off together, and it all kicks off, and it leads to this big confrontation between Dylan's mother and Grendel's mother, and it's really great. And there's also sort of this kind of soldier hero called Ben Wolf, which obviously isn't a very subtle play on the name of Beowulf, but it's kind of satirical in a way that he's depicted. But I really enjoyed this book. Again, it was a real page turner as these two worlds collide, and you can feel the sort of epic nature of the story as it unfolds between the two families. But one, as I say, that I found quite unexpected. It surprised me, but I did enjoy reading it throughout. It's based in modern times in a modern American town and the outskirts. So that's one that I also really enjoyed. The next one I'm mentioning more than anything because, as you're probably aware, it's recently been longlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction for 2023, and that's Maggie O Farrell's The Marriage Portrait. So this book is based on a poem by Robert Browning's called My Last Duchess, and basically it's a story of a character called Lucrezia, who is Italian. She's from the Medici family, and she's always been a bit of a troublemaker. We have a really good insight into her childhood, and she's a bit of a spitfire, and her father has a menagerie in the cellar of his palace, and she's sort of likened to the wild tiger that he brings back from his travels and houses in the cellar. And some of this information is actually based on historical accuracy and sort of loosely based on the facts that this young lady at the age of 15 was forced to marry the Duke of Ferrara in a way that strengthened both families. But it was a very short-lived marriage, and I don't want to give too much away, although the opening kind of gives away the ending to a certain extent. This book has received sort of mixed reviews. Some people have said that it's overly described and overly laboured, but the way I read it is Lucrezia is an artist. She sees things with an artist eye. So there is detail, there is observation throughout. She really brings the world to life in a really vivid way. If you enjoyed Hamlet, you may very well enjoy this one. It's different from Hamlet, but it is an interesting story. The only thing I wasn't so keen on was the ending, probably because it felt a bit too neat. I could kind of see it coming. But yeah, definitely well worth reading. particularly if you're interested in the Women's Prize, or you like Maggie O Farrell, or you're interested in historical fiction, or you really like vivid landscapes in your writing, this is one that I would recommend. Lastly, I wanted to mention Pat Barker's Silence of the Girls, and this came out a few years ago, 2018, and there's now a sequel which is called The Women of Troy. So if you enjoy this one, you can go straight ahead and start reading the sequel. And this is a retelling of the Iliad through the voices of the captive women that have been sort of stolen through the ransacking of different cities. So it's told through the eyes of Briseis, and excuse me in advance if I get all of these pronunciations wrong, but here we go, I'm doing my best. And she's given as a prize to Achilles after her city's been successfully ransacked. The whole book opens with this really vivid description of the ransacking of the city. I have the name of the city written down, but I'm not going to try and pronounce it because, again, I'm going to get it horribly wrong. But it's incredibly visceral, incredibly just affecting and unexpected. It's unflinching in its description of war, and we really feel for these women and the way that their lives are affected completely. You know, their lives are completely changed. They become from queens to slaves overnight and lose you know, all their husbands and sons and you know, brothers are all lost in the process, and they're left sort of stranded. So as I say, it's quite a hard-hitting book, and I think I prefer this to the sequel, though if you're going to read this one, you know, you need to read the sequel as well. But it's a fantastic read by Pat Barker, and one that I'd really recommend. So those are my 6 books from the shelves, and I'm hoping to record more of these sort of slightly shorter videos for you with recommendations. But I'd really like to know whether there are any books that you've read that are reworkings of fairy tales or stories or plays from the past, and what your thoughts are on these recommendations that I've given you today. And as I say, you know, subscribe not to miss any of my future videos and come along with me in the journey. But I'd love to know your thoughts, so I'll speak to you in the comments. Thanks, and see you again soon. Bye.